2020. We fight the COVID-19 pandemic. We wear masks. We keep our distance. We stay inside. Ludum 46 surely happened at the strangest of times. What better way to forget about all the horror and stay out of harm's way than to devote yourself to a game jam? This is the post-mortem of my Ludum 46 game, Rampage. If survival games have taught me one thing, it's to always have supplies at hand. So I left my shelter to scavenge. All non-essential shops were closed. It's eerie seeing everyone with face masks all of a sudden, like in the first act of a disaster movie. At least the store stocked everything I needed. Just no toilet paper. After my safe return, I had coffee, something to read, and a lot of free time to watch the world burn from the safety of our balcony. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating a little. Actually, I contemplated my past Ludum Dare experiences and the games I have made. My comedy adventure, Thanks for Nothing aside, most fell into the category of moody horror in one way or another. Soccer, dribbling for your life on a zombie-infested soccer field. Ghoulish. Hunted by a nebulous monster in Power MT. Haunting. Recovering your loved one from the land of the dead in Memorandum. Depressing. Opening a gate to hell in The Cellar. Horrifying. Taking your last road trip in The Sacrificial Trail. Terrorizing. Kicking Counter-Strike players in the head in Pony. Now that's just weird, man. I felt it was time to break the mold, if I could, now more than ever. But that would hinge on the quality of the theme anyway. The theme. The last round of voting was still underway, and the finalists were a ghastly sight to behold, as ever. It was hard to decide whether I disliked one or outright hated it. The dirty work done, I officially joined the event and made the traditional "I'm in" post. The jam would start at 3 a.m. in the morning. Good, because I had a lot of chores to take care of anyway. As the yard work was done, I dressed my Animal Crossing avatar for the occasion. I wanted to show up in style. I was invited to Charlize's birthday party after all. The decisive hour drew near, and I was anxious to learn which crappy theme would rise from the pile of crap this time. It was Keep It Alive, and it smothered my hopes for an inspired brainstorming session at once. People asked if I hated the theme. I was glad I could reassure them. Yes, I did. But that had never stopped me from trying. I started Scully and went to work. Instead of looking to games for ideas, I looked around the room and contemplated what someone would keep alive. Themselves, friends and family, a creature, an idea, a system, a dream. From these categories I branched out. What do I keep alive? Houseplants. Well, my phone? Old consoles? That's all not very exciting. My fourth idea had more originality to it. You'd have to keep an entity alive that you relied upon while it was trying to kill you for some reason. Now, that's interesting, but also pretty grim again. An hour later, I didn't have much more to go on, and thus began to probe that idea for possible mechanics. Still, I wasn't convinced to go the action game route. Could it work as a strategy game? A text adventure? Have other games done something similar? I mean, it sounded like a mechanic you'd find in a retro game. I've seen hundreds, if not thousands, of games in my life. Surely one of them would be similar to what I had in mind, with mechanics I could get inspired by. "5:30 in the morning, I was feeling tired over inspired. The old magazines hadn't helped. All they did was show me what better ideas had been done 30 years ago by smarter people on crappier machines. I got up sometime after 3 in the afternoon. I didn't even pretend to try working without a proper fill of programmer fuel. There are not many tasks I can perform with my eyes closed, but making coffee is one of them. Necessarily. Once my metabolism was up to speed, I went over my ideas from earlier and talked them through with Connie.
Then I found battery where you have to make it through a level, but you have to make sure that you don't run out of power.
Her favorite was also the entity that's trying to kill you. But it was so dark, being hunted by a monster or a wild beast. Why would it do that? What could possibly be lighthearted or even cute about that? It was Connie who came up with the animal being aggressive because of an injury the player wants to treat.
Das ist voll gut.
What's an animal that's both aggressive yet not too threatening? A wild cat? A dog? No carnivores. What do unicorns eat? Kaiserschmarrn, probably. An alpaca? better, a RAM. A RAM incessantly charging at the player. I had never drawn a RAM before, let alone a cute one, but I gave it a shot anyway.
Hat hinter sich so eine Blutspur.
Wouldn't you know it, it even turned out recognizable. And it had only taken me 13 hours. Usually I would have jumped straight into programming at this point. But I decided it would be better to draft a proper design document first, to have an overview of all the necessary tasks and features before trying to cast those into code. I finished after 5:15 and could have started programming. But I lacked the assets for that. And for those I needed an art style. And for that I needed to get inspired. As so often before, I turned to my selection of art books, though none of them would fit. I recalled enjoying screenshots of a game I had seen the other day in an issue of Retro Gamer, Get Dexter 2. Doesn't that look pleasant? So lush, so friendly. I want that. From a search on Google Images, I took the crummiest JPEG I could find and picked some colors from it, the basis of my palette. To gauge how they would work together visually, I quickly placed some splotches on a new canvas. I like to start with a very coarse brush so I don't lose myself in painting details. Instead, I lost myself in painting a tile map. The RAM I painted over my whiteboard sketch in Photoshop. For the player, I drew a little figure with a cat ear cap that soon turned into a proper cat. Once I was happy with both RAM and player, I animated walk cycles and states, added more objects to the tile map, and finally started the engine. Game Maker is still my favorite engine, especially to use in jams, because I feel I know my way around it much better than with Unity, for example. I had my first animated assets on a grassy background and could start with the first lines of code. 17.5 hours after the jam had begun. Why is it never easy? Not even an hour later, the code for player movement was a mess, halfway relying on built-in variables and my own, stepping on each other's toes. Never mind, I'll fix that later. Gotta get things done! I continued with the ram's homing behavior, targeting the player and charging in their general direction. I found a quick solution by having the ram linearly interpolate between its current facing direction and its absolute angle to the player. This lerping worked wonderfully. Until it didn't. If players were standing to the right of the ram, it would move erratically and glitch out. That's where I started to despise how GameMaker handles directions, more so than usual. Directions in GameMaker are wonky to begin with. 0 degrees means facing right. From there it counts counterclockwise. 90 degrees is up, 180 left, 270 down. What's worse, GameMaker always claims directions between 0 and 360. When the angle to the player crosses the 360-0 boundary and the angle difference is suddenly huge, the RAM will oscillate between 0 and 360, settle on 180 and effectively bail to the left, away from the player. Scrambling for a band-aid to the problem cost me an hour, but mercifully the fix worked. Instead of using the absolute point direction, I went with the relative angle difference. Once I introduced obstacles for both player and RAM to collide with, things took a turn for the worse. My code couldn't withstand any more hacks, and collisions became an unstable glitch fest of literal edge cases. I took the collision code of my Ludum Dare 41 game, Soccer, and transplanted it to my current game, spending half an hour to tie the ends together, which broke it for good. I just can't do collisions. I was so frustrated and fed up with GameMaker and yearned for something as simple as the capsule collider in Unity. Unity? Can't be much worse than GameMaker, can it? Screw this! I'll start over in Unity! I had made my previous jam game thanks for nothing with Unity, so what could go wrong? After importing the sprites and making good use of Rigid Body 2D, I set out to port the code for the RAM over from the GameMaker language to C# and ran into troubles, naturally. Suddenly, I needed to do vector math and deal with physical entities. I neither had an idea how to do that, nor the nerve to study documentation and tutorials on the subjects. An hour later, the only thing I had learned was that I hated it. Hated my game, hated the engine, hated myself for being so foolish, and hated the jam in general. Why should I torture myself? Why should I keep going? On Discord, my wonderful patrons posted some affirming gifs and encouraged me to take a break and think things over. Normally, I would have bailed to a cafe, gone for a walk, or hit the road, but thanks to COVID-19, I couldn't leave the house. I fled from my obligations nonetheless. To my little island getaway. I chopped wood. I broke stones. I dug up fossils. And I went fishing. It all was very repetitive, grindy, and laborious. Just what Animal Crossing is, really. And for the first time that felt good. In all that grating repetitiveness, a faint spark of motivation rose from the ashes of my little burnout, and for a while I just stood there, listening to the surf, contemplating my next steps. With Unity, I never know how to properly do things. It's a minefield. With GameMaker, I'm at least familiar enough to make something work. With that realization, I returned a changed man and yanked out the bad code like weeds and cultivated new, healthy code. It would never resemble the airy elegance of an orchid, but for the jam it was good enough if it was like ivy, sturdy and clinging to what was already there. Not even an hour later, I had it. The ram charging at the player and collisions. This was when I knew I had made it over the crest. From now on, it was smooth sailing. Right? can you sail over a crest? What I've learned from this is that when you try to cut too many corners when it comes to programming, you cut yourself. And this whole injury took me way too long to get sorted. And for the first time today, I feel hopeful. There is this silver lining on the horizon that this may even become a game. Yeah, I can't say much more. I really need to get back to work. With newfound energy, I added to the proof of concept to expand it into a game. In practice, that meant to give both player and RAM health bars, introduce items, and handle the game over cases when either player or the RAM dies. Sometime after 6 in the morning, I could almost envision a game underneath the hex. I was too exhausted to go on, both physically and emotionally. So everything that was missing, I scrawled on a to-do list and called it a day. I slept from around 8 AM to 3 PM again. I'd like to pretend that the jam messed up my sleeping rhythm, but actually I was almost in my usual mode. Unusual, however, was waking up to a tasty surprise Connie had put on my desk. But I couldn't survive on that alone. I needed to craft my special kind of bean soup. I had to get going, but breezing through my coffee ceremony was not the best idea. I don't cry over spilled coffee, well, but a good omen that was not. I painted some additional assets for the environment to be able to make a mock-up level with everything it needed, and followed up with planting invisible colliders, a goal zone, and implemented winning and losing conditions. Then I could do some playtesting. This vertical slice revealed some shortcomings. Players couldn't easily escape the charging ram, nor would they know the goal of the game, and environmental puzzles were missing, such as blocks the ram could push. To help players escape Remy, yes, he had a name then, I added a dashing mechanic with a cooldown timer. For more interesting interactions with the level, crumbling blocks seemed like a quick and simple solution. 7 hours remaining and I was falling behind. I had no levels whatsoever, no tutorial, no title nor ending, and nothing in terms of sound. To make it more of a game, I set my sights on coding up the level progressions. Once that worked in theory, I designed the first level. Usually, you would test the level flow with programmer art and iterate until it felt right before making it look nice. But that was a luxury I could not afford. It had to work on my first attempt, so instead of frequent testing, I merely imagined how it would play beat by beat as I clicked my tiles into existence, then placed colliders on top. 40 minutes later, the first level was complete and had everything in it. I watched Connie give it a shot and provide feedback, and racked my brains how I could mix up the mechanics in an interesting way for any additional levels. But players first had to learn the rules and mechanics. I took the plunge to make a tutorial level. Tutorials are always treacherous, because you have to pollute your code with lots of special cases and overrides that don't apply to the rest of the game. Worst, tutorials need text boxes. Oh, those wretched things. 11:15, I still was not through with my tutorial level as I couldn't iterate over the design easily. If you've complained about it being too big, now you know why. After lots of concessions and moving around signposts, the tutorial was finally complete without breaking the subsequent level. Hooray! Title screen, tutorial, 1 level, ending screen. It's a game! A very short one, but a game! As regular viewers of my post-mortems can attest, I have a slight tendency towards polish over content. Thus, instead of trying my hand at an additional level, I needed gratification from making music and sound effects. I just had to be fast. 3 hours left. I allotted an hour for music, 30 minutes for sound effects, 30 minutes for the implementation, and another hour to come up with 2 or 3 more levels. Plenty of time actually. What a relief. All set for the soundtrack. I had no idea what style of music or instrumentation would fit the game, just that I wanted it to be upbeat and lively. I started with a drum track and soon realized that synthesizers would be out of question, and a rock ensemble would be ill-fitting as well. I experimented with an upright bass and hit a sweet spot on the blues scale, and things evolved from there. Because Remy the Ram has a French name, a musette, a French accordion, came next. Then I augmented the piece with a marimba and played around with stringed instruments before giving up in favor of a cheap recorder. Once the instrumentation and the main music loop was complete, I needed 3 more short cues for game over, completing a level, and finishing the game. Telling it makes the process seem straightforward, but for a long time I was just winging it until things started to click. I compiled a quick list of what sound effects I needed, and it was more than expected. No time to run around the flat with my recorder. I had to make do with what I found around my desk. My fingers on a paper towel became Remy's galloping. The cracking boulders consisted of stones and ripping duct tape from my bag of coffee beans. Their smell was wonderful, by the way. Brushing over my arm would become the dash. Items were bits from loading a stapler. For Remy and the player taking damage, I improvised. In Reaper, I edited and manipulated my recordings, piled multiple samples on top of each other in the hopes of making them sound less crappy. When the sound assets were game ready, I was down to 55 minutes. Implementation ate another 20. And I still needed to come up with another level. No time for a concept, a sketch, or even proper testing. If I wanted another level, it had to be perfect from the get-go. I wanted to give players a bit of a challenge with Remy starting to injure himself until he could break through to the player, hoping that would stretch the playtime of my game a little bit longer. Yeah, real cheap, I know. I copy-pasted tiles and scenery and hoped that the level would not be too punishing. Finally, I took a page from the book of Super Mario Maker. If you can beat your own level, it's fit for publication. I made it on my first attempt. Testing over. 15 minutes remaining. I rushed over to Photoshop to rework both the ending and title screen. No time for polish whatsoever. I mean, that green blob behind Remy is supposed to be a circle. And I couldn't even type properly anymore. I imported the new assets and compiled the game 30 seconds before the deadline. Why does it always have to be such a crunch? Submission hour was on and I was anxious about the state of the website. But Mike had been optimizing the website as the rest of us worked on our games. The site felt a bit sluggish, sure, but it was a far cry from the DDoS days of past gens. Good work, Mike! With 24 minutes in the bank, Rampage was done and ready to be played and rated by the wonderful Ludum jammers who individually had been through their very own versions of Crunch just then. But before calling it a night, there was one important thing that I had to get done. Something that I couldn't leave on the table. I hate this game so much. I am the Prince of Darkness. But I also enjoy cute stuff. Something that didn't really find its way into my games. LD46 was a big success for me in that regard. Proving to myself that I can do more than dark and foreboding. Best of all, Rampage was my most fun game ever. With actual gameplay and players' Twitch skills being relevant for once. In the comments I also saw the best feedback one of my games had ever gotten. Wish it was longer. Because it implies that players enjoyed the game so much they wanted more of it. While I had been lucky before switching engines during the jam, this time it backfired horribly. I also learned that I should go into LD jams more prepared, have different frameworks in place that I can easily expand, that I don't have to fret over coding my nth input controller and scenery collisions from scratch each and every time. Maybe I will even listen to myself for a change. Maybe things will be different the next time. Maybe the theme won't suck. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. Videos like this wouldn't be possible without the support of my wonderful, beautiful, amazing Patreon supporters. So if you want to become one of them, just head over to patreon.com/pixelprophecy, or you can just buy me a coffee with a one-time donation over at pixelprophecy.com/donate. If you like the music, you can find the soundtrack to this and all other Ludum post-mortems over at sefcarissa.bandcamp.com. By the way, I also stream on Twitch, that's twitch.tv/pixelprophecy. And since I'm plugging pretty much everything I got, sure, why the hell not? So if you want nerdy stickers, mugs, t-shirts, we got everything over at philstrahl.redbubble.com. And that's all, I think. thanks for watching this to the very end.